polls are closed and the first results are coming in to WFLA.com, including Florida's Senate race between Senator Rick Scott, potential challenger Debbie Mukersel-Powell. We are live in your local election headquarters to break down all the live results and let you know what you need to know ahead of November. Welcome in to the Stream Center, folks, with a full panel of guests tonight. Great to be joined by WFLA political anchor Ty Russell, and flanking him on the left and on the right, two familiar faces to our WFLA.com stream audience. Of course, former Senate president here in Florida, Tom Lee, who's joining us in the Stream Center, and joining us from right here in the Tampa Bay area, former Congressman Jim Davis, former gubernatorial candidate here in Florida. Great to have you guys back on stream. Let me just start by saying thank you. It's going to be a lively conversation tonight, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Let's get right into it, and let's get right to the live results here. These are just coming into WFLA.com, folks. And you can click on the link in the description on this video if you want to see the live results as they are coming in. To absolutely no surprise here off the top with the Florida U.S. Senate race on the GOP side, 13% precincts reporting, and it's a commanding lead for the incumbent Senator Rick Scott.
And I can tell you, when it comes to Senator Scott, the way he's been campaigning, I haven't in any sort of news conference heard him even mention his challengers in his race. He's only been focused on his likely Democratic opponent, Debbie Mukersel-Powell. But it's, yes, people did expect this number for Senator Scott to be a shoo-in. And I just want to note that, you know, he's running for a second term. But if you remember, during his first term, there was a recount battle where he ousted a long-term Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. And so he's going up against a very crucial race here. It's going to be another fiery race. And yes, people did expect Senator Scott to take a big lead so far in this race right here.
Tom, I don't think you're over there shaking in your boots about this one as far as Senator Rick Scott and his reelection chances.
No, this was all pretty predictable here, that he was going to have a landslide victory here tonight. And no one's going to outwork Rick Scott, and no one's probably going to outspend him either. So, you know, Florida's changed a lot over the last few years since the Bill Nelson race. We now have a pretty substantial Republican advantage here, and there will have to be a lot of partisan intensity, I would think, on the Democratic side, coming out of these changes that have taken place at the top of the ticket for this race to get too close in the general election. I think it's definitely his race to lose.
And when you brought up how expensive this race is, I mean, we're talking millions. I believe I was looking at Open Secrets, and I mean, the gap between how much Rick Scott is spending and raising compared to even Debbie Mukersel-Powell is by the millions. Yeah. And, you know, I've been seeing Senator Scott here in the Bay Area just campaign almost every weekend or every other weekend, definitely on the ground, spending money and raising money.
Let's look at the other.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim.
Well, let's talk about the primary. Then I want to go back to the general, because Tom made some good points. So Debbie's doing very well.
Yeah, let's start here for a second with just the Democratic results that are coming in. 12% of precincts reporting, and Debbie Mukersel-Powell in a commanding lead here. This is a showdown in the making that we have been talking about on WFLA News Channel 8 for months. Jim, why don't you hop in?
Yeah, so Stanley Campbell's number is interesting. He got a significant labor endorsement, but Debbie Mukersel-Powell is a very good candidate. But the issue is what Tom mentioned earlier. He and I both run statewide. It is so expensive, and Rick Scott will not be outspent. But there is a vulnerability here in the general election. Rick Scott is auditioning to be the Senate Majority Leader, and he's putting that ahead of all of his ambitions. I mean, he went up and sat in the courtroom behind Donald Trump. He's pretty much inseparable from Donald Trump and his agenda right now, because he wants Donald Trump to tap him to be the next leader of the U.S. Senate. So if you get into a very partisan general election, which Tom alluded is a possibility, Debbie Mukersel-Powell becomes a competitive candidate, even if she's at a significant fundraising disadvantage. So that'll be the race to watch on those points.
Tom, anything to add there?
No, I think that's true. The question really is going to be at the end of the day is, does Florida get close enough? Right now, it's not, for the presidential candidates to spend much money driving turnout here in Florida. And at the moment, it doesn't appear that it will get that close. But as we've seen in the last month, a month is a lifetime in politics.
And do you think
So I
that
want
because of Senator Scott has said very negative things about the current majority leader in the Senate, do you think that that would have any sort of impact here in the state of Florida? Do you think that the bickering between the two will have any sort of impact on voters?
No, I think that's all such inside baseball, and this is probably going to come down to registration here in Florida and any turnout advantage that the Democrats might be able to engender as a result of some of the enthusiasm that they're experiencing right now.
I'm going to add to what Tom said. I don't think there's any signs yet that the Harris campaign is going to invest heavily in Florida, but it's all subject to the numbers. And Florida is constantly changing. It's one of the reasons Rick Scott has to work so hard, because there's a lot of people live in the state that didn't vote for him last time or never voted for him and really don't know what he is. But I think the other major factor in all these races in November are these two referendums, the one to legalize marijuana and the second to restore some of the access to reproductive rights that have been taken away by the legislature. Those two amendments alone are going to drive significant turnout for Democrats and Republicans and for voters that may make some of these races closer than they would be otherwise.
As we're looking here at the live results that are coming in, we'll pay close attention to the race here with the U.S. Senate because, I mean, Ty, you know this. I know we all know this. These are races that could get called relatively quickly, perhaps even by 7:30 Eastern time, really in the next 10 minutes. Again, it's not that many precincts reporting just yet statewide, but we're talking about enormous leads for both Rick Scott and, yes, Debbie Muckersil Powell with a commanding lead over Stanley Campbell. I want to just quickly cycle through the local congressional races that we are paying close attention to tonight. Just the very first few, I would say 25,000 or so votes are in, and Gus Bilirakis already earning the check mark. It's being reported that he is the projected winner in the Florida U.S. House District 12 race. Not really a surprise there, Ty. Any thoughts about District 12? I mean, this is a seat that Bilirakis has held for more than a decade now.
I think everybody expected this to be a shoe-in, and it's no surprise that, minutes after polls closed, we're already reporting the victory here in this race. And I feel like this will be just a shoe-in for him, and he's safe right now.
Let's continue to cycle through some of these races. Again, these are all coming in right now to WFLA.com. We'll go over to District 13. Nothing coming in from Pinellas County, but Ty, this is a big race because this is Anna Paulina Luna's seat, and there's been a lot of talk as to whether or not this is a seat that could get flipped in Congress. Yeah,
Florida Democrats have been really trying to flip this seat. This covers, most of Pinellas County, and the seat still leans it's favorable for a Republican to keep this seat. However, Florida Democrats have been spending money and investing trying to flip this seat. And already, Whitney Fox, who you see here on the screen, even though the numbers aren't in, we got a news release just moments ago from her campaign, and she is already claiming victory. She wrote, quote, "I am deeply grateful and humbled by the trust voters have placed in me to be their Democratic nominee for Congress. This victory isn't mine. It belongs to every parent struggling with rising costs, every senior worried about their health care, and every young person fighting for a better future." And she went on to say that she is ready to face Anna Paulina Luna. Of course, she's the current congresswoman in Pinellas County in that district, District 13. Whitney is someone who has the most money in the race, who has the most endorsements in this race among her challengers in the Democratic primary here. And so I believe a second favorite was Sabrina Busbar there. John Liccione. What's interesting about that candidate is he wasn't he didn't pass the vetting process in the Pinellas County Democratic Party. So there was a lot of tension when it comes to John Liccione, but he's not expected to get many votes. It's Whitney Fox, who we suspect will come out victorious in this race.
0% precincts reporting and claiming victory. To quote a classic, it's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's hope it works out for her. Jim, Tom, as far as you know, it not even being 7:30 yet, no precincts reporting and claiming victory. I mean, you better be right?
Yeah, for sure. Jim would know more about this race, this primary than I would, but I know she was favored going into the primary here, and maybe she's got some exit polling or something that we don't have access to. But it is a pretty bold prediction when you got zeros on the screen to predict the victory at the end of the game.
She's a smart candidate. She knows it would be a huge mistake to say that prematurely. I suspect she's seen the tally on the early voting, which is probably very significant. This is a race to watch. She's raised a lot of money. She's traveling all over the country. These two amendments I mentioned earlier, I'm sure we'll be talking about, could make this the most competitive congressional race in the state.
It's something that we're going to be paying close attention to tonight, of course, District 13, and we'll talk a little bit more over the course of the night as to, you know, what potentially a Whitney Fox versus Anna Paulina Luna matchup looks like. Let's continue going through our districts here and see if we've got any precincts reporting. We do have a few thousand votes coming in District 14. District 14 making up portions of Hillsborough and Pinellas County, but primarily this is Kathy Castor's seat. This is Kathy Castor's seat going back to 2007, of course, having this seat in District 14. Previously, the District 11 seat held by you, of course, former Congressman Jim Davis. Jim, while we've got you up on screen, you want to what are the odds here with this race?
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough district for a Republican. It's been gerrymandered to help make the Luna district more Republican. It's the old Bill Young district for those of us that have been around in a while. And so it's a tough battle. And I think whoever wins this primary is going to have their work cut out for them. It's just a tough race to take out a strong Democratic incumbent.
Super early. Only a few thousand votes are in. We'll pay close attention, of course, to our local congressional races. Moving on to District 15. And then now, full disclosure, obviously, with Tom in the building. Tom knows Laurel quite well, obviously. Laurel, of course, being Tom's wife. And Tom, why don't we just start there? Where is Laurel tonight? Is she having a watch party? And I would imagine she feels pretty good about her chances tonight.
Yeah, she's having a watch party over in Thanona-Sasa with some family and some supporters, and she's a fabulous candidate, and this doesn't surprise me in the least.
No surprise here that Laurel has a comfortable lead in District 15. This is obviously her seat. She is the incumbent, having held the seat since what was it? I think it was last year, right? Last
22.
Year. Yep. So up for.
Yeah, I want to say something about this since Tom's a little limited. Laurel Lee was originally opposed by Donald Trump, and she stood strong and withstood that, and that got a lot of national attention. And so this is a very strong result for her in a primary where she once had the Republican nominee for president on the other side of the race. It's quite an accomplishment to land where she is right now.
Yeah, this is her first re-election. So, of course, paying close attention to the District 15, covering Hillsborough, Pasco, Polk counties. Let's check out now District 15 and see if there's any results coming in. Vern Buchanan, longtime congressman representing District 16, considered to be an enormous favorite over Eddie Speer. No precincts reporting here just yet. Vern Buchanan holding on to this seat going back to 2007. On the other side in District 16, you have the hopeful Democratic challengers, Trent Miller and Jan Schneider. Again, this is, we can just hit the fast forward button and look ahead to November. The odds of Vern Buchanan being unseated in District 16 are slim to absolutely none.
Yeah.
And we can probably emphasize the none a little bit. But of course, the process will play out, and we'll see exactly who it will be on the Democratic side to challenge him in District 16. Moving ahead to District 17, going down to Sarasota. This is Greg Stubbe's seat. And two challengers here, Manny Lopez and Matthew Montavon. Again, 6,000 or so votes now just trickling in, and it looks to be somewhat even between the two. Extremely early here. Any thoughts on any of these particular races thus far? Jim, Tom, Ty, anything that catches your eye?
With the exception of the Annapolina Luna seat and Laurel's district, District 15, my wife's district, most of these districts have been gerrymandered, if you will, or compacted to the constructed in a way that there's a substantial partisan advantage one way or the other. Kathy Castor is obviously very popular in our community. Her mother was a former secretary, commissioner of education, and the president of USF, and we've all known her. Jim's known her. I've known her for years, and Kathy's a credible candidate and in a solid district. And on the flip side, you go down to Sarasota and Bradenton, and you've got Vern Buchanan and Greg Stubbe, and those districts are just about as Republican as her district is Democratic, and it's going to be very hard for anybody to mount a serious challenge to those seats.
Yeah, I think the races that many people across the nation and political experts have been watching is, of course, the Annapolina Luna seat. There's another, I guess, Darren Soto. People have been keeping a close eye on that one a little bit. There's another one down in Miami-Dade people have been watching, and of course, Matt Gaetz, because of the controversy between Matt Gaetz and the former Speaker of the House. So those are some congressional seats in the state of Florida that people are watching. Would you agree, Jim, Tom?
Yeah.
We're one of the most gerrymandered states in the country, and the Republicans are the biggest sinners right now. The Democrats have done it too, but the computer technology allows them to slice and dice districts beyond imagination. What's ironic is that a number of us, Democrats and Republicans, fought to amend the Constitution to try to have an independent selection of congressional districts and legislative districts. It's failed, but we need to keep trying, because what's happening is it's depriving a lot of voters, and particularly the growing body of independents, of choices.
We've got I want to go back here to District 13. We do have a sizable number of precincts reporting now, 77% precincts reporting. Again, as Ty mentioned here towards the top, Whitney Fox has already claimed victory, and with 77% of precincts reporting, this is still a race that is officially not yet been called, Ty. We're waiting on the check mark for it to actually officially be called based on the projections that Whitney Fox is going to win. But this is looking like Whitney Fox versus Annapolina Luna in November. So let's bring up everybody here on screen, and let's actually talk about this. I'm very curious to the vulnerability. Oh, it is being called? Okay. Okay,
AP
so
called.
AP called 13th District on the Democratic side is being called for Whitney Fox, who will take on Representative Annapolina Luna in November. This is a particular race that has been circled not just here in Florida, but nationally as a potential flip. But that's what I want to bring up with our political anchor, Ty Russell, and of course with Jim Davis and Tom Lee joining us here on your local election headquarters. The idea that Annapolina Luna's seat is a coin flip. What would you say to that, Tom? Is there how do you like Whitney's odds or heading into November?
Well, Annapolina Luna is a relatively new member of Congress. She was elected in 2022 also. The district leans Republican for sure. A lot of times what happens in these races depends on what's going on at the top of the ticket and just how the turnout model looks at the end of the day. Democrats tend to do very well from a turnout perspective in presidential elections. And a month ago, it wasn't looking like people were very motivated on the Democratic side. That seems to have changed. If the Democrats can turn voters out in District 13, you've got a real horse race over there. Annapolina Luna is a staunchly conservative Republican. Her base is very, very much behind her. But I don't know where the independents are in that race, and a lot of it's going to depend upon how Whitney Fox can appeal to them and whether this race comes down to a race about economics and the cost of living, or whether some of these amendments on the ballot, like recreational marijuana and the abortion amendment, drive turnout.
And it's no secret that the Congresswoman, the sitting Congresswoman right now, is MAGA Republican. And do you think that any of her policies that she has proposed and some of the comments that she has made while in D.C. or through Twitter or now X, do you think any of that could have an impact on Republican voters who aren't so MAGA over in Pinellas County? And that's for both Jim and Tom.
Well, let me start by saying Whitney Fox has run a near perfect campaign. And the best example of that is she called the race before it even got to us. Um, and I just got an email from her, and it's a perfect message. These two amendments on the ballot make this race competitive. And as the Harris numbers start to rise in Florida, and they are starting to rise, including in South Florida, and Democrats get motivated, if people around the country begin to think that Whitney Fox can win, she's going to have the money she needs because Anna Paulina is a national figure. I mean, she spent her campaign funds to fly to New York to sit in the courtroom with Donald Trump. I mean, she is attached at the hip to him, and she has made herself a national figure, and that cuts both ways. So if Whitney Fox continues to run the kind of campaign she's running and she gets those resources, I agree with Tom. This race leans Republican, but some of these independents and Republicans, this is not necessarily their kind of Republican. Tom can speak more to that than I can.
Yeah, Pinellas County is a moderate center right county. This is certainly a center right district. Let's maybe put it better that way. And I don't know Whitney Fox that well, but her campaign in the general election really needs to work hard to appeal to those independents. You can't beat somebody with nobody, and she's obviously not a nobody, but she's going to have to appeal to these independents in the district and develop a message that distances herself from some of the things that have gone on during the Biden administration, or adequately point out some of the positions that Anna Paulina has taken that may be contrary to the moderates in the district.
Let's take everybody a live look here to Chicago. The DNC, certainly a different type of energy in this building, Jim, as you alluded to. How much will the recent enthusiasm behind a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz ticket spill over into a race like Anna Paulina Luna versus Whitney Fox in November? We can now officially show the check mark, by the way, there. Oh, it just disappeared, but it was there a moment ago. But Jim, back to just this, the enthusiasm with the Democratic Party. It's just very much different now than it was, 6, 7, 8 weeks ago.
No, it's clearly going to be a factor, and it's going to be a factor in turnout. It's going to be a factor in enthusiasm, which wins close races. And a number of the issues associated with the presidential are very much congressional races. What happens to prescription drug prices, care for veterans, how we deal with Putin and NATO, reproductive rights. These are going to be issues that people know Congress has a lot to do with, as well as the president. And those will work in her favor if Vice President Harris is running strong nationally, which she is right now.
Let's take everybody to a projection that just came into the newsroom seconds ago, and it is in, I believe it is in District 15. Here it is. Let's go to District 15. Laurel Lee, according to the Associated Press, has won District 15 on the GOP side. Absolute no surprise there. We talked a little bit about this earlier, already in a commanding lead. And even with just 14% of precincts reporting, she will cruise into a primary victory. Tom, I mean, come on. For your household, no surprise here. And it'll likely, of course, be another win for her in November, the way that things are stacked up.
Yeah, I'm really proud of her. She's such a class act, a really, really smart person, and has tried really hard to focus on issues in the Congress where she can get things done for the people in our community, working with Kathy Castor. And there's a lot of things that aren't partisan in Washington, D.C., as much as we think they all are, and yet still support the principles that the conservative principles that she was raised on. Her father's a retired two-star general. And she has a really strong military background and a good sense and good feel for the district. So I wouldn't think she's going to have a problem in the general, but, there's a lot of things. You talked about the District 13 race. District 15 is no different. You've got a conflict going on in the Middle East, and everybody's got to stake out positions on those issues in a way that is going to appeal to the political center in their districts.
As we look here again at the Senate races as well, keeping close tabs on the race for Rick Scott and Debbie Mukersel-Powell. no projections here, Ty, but these numbers are telling quite the story so far.
Oh, yeah. And Debbie Mucarsel-Powell is definitely riding off of the enthusiasm wave brought on by the switch from Biden to Harris. I remember when I talked to her shortly after that, she made sure to talk about Vice President Harris and how she was excited. And she believes that that excitement will carry into Florida. Of course, she's getting pushback from people like Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida GOP. They think that that is all talk. However, when you look at someone like Senator Scott, who's been spending lots of money and also raising money, you kind of figure that somebody at least is worried about the sort of momentum that's coming down from the switchover from Biden to Harris, and of course the amendments coming up on the ballot when it comes to abortion and marijuana, and those are going to be key. And Democrats have been trying to talk more about those amendments too, to attract more voters to the poll to vote in favor of those amendments, and also down the ballot for Democrats. Would you agree, Jim and Tom?
Yeah, the thing that's very interesting about the abortion amendment is that is not a partisan effort. There have been people that have tried to get them involved in races where the candidate is pro-choice. And to my knowledge, they are saying, no, we are focused on an issue. We're not focused on party. And so that amendment effort, which is very well funded, is designed to bring out a broad swath of voters, not just Democrats. Some of those voters are going to vote for the person they agree with on that issue. And so I think that's going to help people that are fighting for freedom on reproductive rights in these campaigns.
But what do you think about someone like Governor Ron DeSantis, who has been speaking out against these and raising money to try to defeat these amendments? How do you feel about that? Well, how much of an impact will that have when it comes to bringing people out to the polls to try to vote against those amendments?
Well, I think that one of the things we would all agree on is Donald Trump's going to get his base voters out. I mean, they are loyal to him to a fault. And a lot of those are Ron DeSantis voters. Ron DeSantis' political standing is probably not as high as it used to be. And he's using a lot of political capital tonight on these school board races we haven't talked about yet, which are very important. So having a Ron DeSantis endorsement may not have as much value as it did in the past, and it may come at a price with some of these independent voters in close races.
You know, Jim, something I'd like to ask you about as we're talking, and we'll go back here one more time to show everybody live results on the Democratic side for U.S. Senate with 40% of precincts reporting, and it's Debbie Mucarsel-Powell with a commanding lead over Stanley Campbell, Brian Rush, and Rod Joseph. You know, Jim, who's the face of the Democrats in Florida these days? We had Nikki Fried, on WFLA.com earlier doing a live interview. She's up, obviously, in Chicago for the DNC and representing Florida Democrats. But, I feel like right now you ask 10 Democrats, you might get 5, 6, or 7 different types of answers as to who the face of the Democratic Party is right now in the state.
Well, Democrats practice democracy, which is messy, but it seems to be holding up pretty well so far for our country. We'll see in November. Now, I think unless you've got a statewide elected official in a major position, you can't really pin the Democratic Party to a particular individual. There isn't a Bob Graham, a Bill Nelson right now. So Florida is many states. Again, as Tom and I can tell you from campaigning. And so Kathy Castor is the face of Democrats in the Tampa Bay area. Darren Soto, who's a terrific legislator, is the face in Orlando. Increasingly, Maxwell Frost, Val Demings once was, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Lois Frankel in South Florida. North Florida is pretty barren right now, except for the mayor of Jacksonville. And Florida's constantly changing. I mean, I think that's really important to keep in mind. A lot of these voters are different from cycle to cycle. So the answer to his question, there's no single person right now, and there probably won't be for a while.
Again, monitoring live results as they come in. We do have another projection to get to, and it's on District 15. Or excuse me, sorry, now 16. We're going to 16. Vern Buchanan, again, this was the one you could have taken $1 million to the bank and doubled your money pretty easily tonight. Vern Buchanan was going to win this race without campaigning for 5 seconds. So on the District 16 race on the GOP side, it's going to be Vern Buchanan, of course, earning the check mark here. Any notes, Tom or Ty? I mean, no surprises here.
Well, Vern's a senior member of the congressional delegation here in Florida, and an influential member in the Republican conference in D.C. He's been in the Congress since 2006 and has moved up the ladder in terms of his prominence there. Is a good fundraiser, has his own wealth, and is well known in the district. So I just wouldn't think, with the partisan advantage that he has down there, that this race is going to be much of a challenge in the general.
And so right now you think in our area, people are probably, at least in the Bay Area, people are probably only watching the Pinellas County district nationally. That's the only kind of competitive.
Yeah, and I think it's because I think the reason that race is going to get so much attention is, A, they have a fabulous candidate in Ms. Fox, and B, Anna Paulina Luna has attached herself to some MAGA Republican principles that are going to be hotly on display here in the general election. I think it's going to draw a lot of attention, that race.
I'd like to come back here for a second because I was just passed a note here by our team and something to pay some attention to. Ty, this is going to interest you. It's obviously going to it's going to interest our entire panel. The website for the Supervisor of Elections is down in 4 counties in the Tampa Bay area. It's going on and off in Manatee, Sarasota, Pinellas, and Hillsborough counties. So, we talk, Tom, Jim, Ty, we talk about this a lot, how primary night is very much a rehearsal for the big night in November. It doesn't always go smoothly, but anytime that you're talking about the digital side of things, a website being used to calculate results, there's already a tremendous talk online and not even online, but at tables in kitchens and dining rooms across the country about trusting the electoral process. When you hear about websites going down in 4 counties, that's going to give everybody a little bit of concern. This is a story that we are monitoring. We're going to have an article up on WFLA.com here shortly to find out exactly what's causing the websites to go down. Is it just coincidence that they went down in 4 counties? Is there a reason that the 4 counties are having problems, around the same time? We're asking these questions tonight.
And the other people who are asking these questions are the challengers for the current supervisors of elections in the Bay Area. I just texted the challenger for the Hillsborough supervisor of election because he was texting me earlier just about some of the issues that he was hearing about. We haven't gotten any of those confirmed just yet, but I know that Pinellas, that supervisor of elections race was talked about in local media today as well. So I'm pretty sure challengers are going to be questioning this over the next several days, just trying to get some answers as well to see what happened and how safe elections are. What do you think?
Well, let me say this. So I was on the ballot in 2000. I was actually with Al Gore and Joe Lieberman in West Tampa on election day. And we recovered from that. Tom worked on it in the legislature. I worked on it in Congress. And Congresswoman Laura Lee was Secretary of State during some tough elections. We've got a good system in Florida. And we don't pay a lot of attention to supervisor elections until something goes wrong. And obviously something's gone wrong tonight. Former Deputy Sheriff Craig Latimer is our supervisor of elections. My personal opinion is he plays it down the middle. And if there's some mistakes made today, he'll learn about them and fix them. I think Pinellas has a good supervisor. But Florida's had done a good job of keeping our elections working well. And if there's some mistakes made tonight, this is the warm-up for the big election in November. But we've had a good system, and it is very important that people on both sides respect it.
It could be something, Jim, too, I should probably mention. It could be just, look, these websites constantly getting pinged by various agencies that are just trying to siphon results in real time. It could be related to a particular vendor. If there's a common vendor that's used between all 4 counties, there's a lot of different reasons. We do not know the reason as to why 4 websites, again, in Manatee, Sarasota, Pinellas, and Hillsborough counties are having problems. But again, it's the first hour on primary night. It's the big rehearsal for November, Tom. Right?
Yeah, you're right, and I think my caution to the public would be to slow their roll a little bit if they're starting to get too anxious about this, because there's a big difference between what's going on behind the scenes in the supervisor of elections office and what's being reported to the public. it is curious that 4 websites have gone down. You're absolutely right. Sometimes these things crash because of excessive traffic that they're just not prepared to handle. But what's going on behind the scenes isn't the same as what you're seeing in the public. The vote is very secure. Our vote isn't hooked to the internet. There's no way the vote can be manipulated through the internet. They may just be having a reporting crisis in getting this information out to the public, and I understand that's troubling to the public. But they can rest assured that what's going on behind the scenes is not reflective of what is being put up on the website.
I'm glad you bring up the difference between the input process and then really the output process, right? There's a difference in how votes are tabulated internally and then how they're actually published to the world and the various agencies that need those results in real time. So our news team here is working on it behind the scenes. Obviously, it's something we'll be talking about tonight on WFLA.com. If we get any updates from our team in the newsroom, we'll pass it along to you. A live look from Chicago. It's the DNC. And speakers, of course, lining up, taking their turn in outlining their vision for the future of America on the Democratic side. We also have a live picture from outside the venue in the United Center in Chicago. Again, full coverage of the DNC on our website, WFLA.com. Let's continue to cycle through our live election results. And guys, feel free to hop in here at any point if there's something that catches your eye. Rick Scott, once again, commanding lead, 50% of precincts reporting. It hasn't been called just yet by the Associated Press, but I'm actually a bit surprised it hasn't been called just yet. It's really just a formality at this point.
It may be that the polls haven't closed adequately in the Panhandle, which is an hour behind us. That could be the reason they're, just a matter of protocol, not calling the race too quickly.
An astute observation by Tom. Let's continue on to the Democratic side. Debbie Mukersel-Powell, again in a commanding lead, 50% of precincts reporting here, and Tom's logic might add up again here as well. It might be related to, of course, Florida being in 2 time zones, the Panhandle represented in the Central time zone. Moving on to District 12, we talked about this earlier. Gus Bilirakis, a resounding victory tonight over Hank Dunlap. Moving to District 13, probably the spotlight race from the congressional side of things. Whitney Fox winning. She has 58% of the vote with 77% precincts reporting. I don't even think that we were fully on the live stream before the time you came out, and she had basically claimed victory. She knew what things were looking like even before we did.
And just over the weekend, she was campaigning with Debbie Mukersel-Powell. They were going around knocking on doors in Pinellas County, trying to get voters to turn out for them. So this is Whitney Fox is a person who has been taken under the Democratic Party wing, and she has been helped and endorsed by so many local elected officials and also national officials as well.
Let's go ahead to District 14. Nothing here just yet in the Kathy Castor district, of course, representing Tampa. But Robert Rochford has an early lead with not too many precincts reporting. District 15, Laurel Lee, your projected winner, her first bid for re-election. She is cleared away to November. Looking ahead to District 16, Vern Buchanan, no surprise here with the check mark next to his name. On the other side, it will be either Trent Miller or Jan Schneider with a long shot chance in November in District 16. And then in District 17, who will challenge Greg Stubbe with nearly half of precincts reporting. It's pretty close between Manny Lopez and Matthew Montavon.
When it comes to Congresswoman Kathy Castor's district, I saw so many Republicans there running. Why is that? Why run in a district that's so blue? What are they trying to gain from that?
Well, a lot of times it's multiple factors. A lot of times the party wants to make sure that everyone's staying busy on the other side of the aisle, and that Kathy Castor's having to campaign, and they recruit candidates to run. It is a democracy, and sometimes people don't do a lot of handicapping when they decide to run. It is a very, very difficult district to win. And if you were trying to hire a professional consultant to help manage a race, you'd probably have a difficult time finding one. But you know, there's a lot of people who believe very strongly in this democracy and want to participate and make a difference, and they believe that the values that they represent are the right things for America. And this is the democratic process. And as much as I don't know, I've never met a candidate who doesn't want to run unopposed. This is really good for America to see challenge and see people step up and want to run for office.
Yeah, you can make the same argument on the Democratic side, right? In District 16, the odds of unseating Vern Buchanan are, we emphasize on the near to none. So Trent Miller, Jan Schneider. Jan Schneider has run, I know in the past we've covered her in previous election cycles. Look, some people just throw their hat into the ring and see exactly, try to figure out what's going to happen. Do they do better than the last time they threw their hat in the ring, so on to speak?
And for the public that maybe has never known someone that runs for office, never met a friend or family member that does, I hope tonight they really appreciate just how much goes into running a campaign. Jim's been through a bunch of them. I've been through a bunch of them. And you give up a big chunk of your life. You give up some of your wealth. The interview process can be pretty humbling, and we should hats off to all the people who step up and run for office in this democracy. It's not an easy task.
And I know we've been talking about some of the key races here, but some races that we don't talk about enough, I feel like, are some of these school board races, especially after Florida Governor Ron DeSantis got heavily involved in endorsing. He endorsed some candidates in the Bay Area this time around as well. What should we be looking for, Jim and Tom, when it comes to these school board races?
Well, let me say, I think these are the most significant races we're covering tonight because Governor DeSantis has handpicked some candidates that have an agenda that will change the agenda of the school boards in Hillsborough Pinellas that get a majority. In the past, our school boards, Democrat or Republican, have done a good job of working together, including resolving their differences and keeping the politics outside the classroom. Tallahassee, not so much. I mean, education has been used as a weapon by both parties, particularly, I'd say, by Governor DeSantis. And tonight, we get to decide whether we continue with sort of more local control or whether we experience some of the politics that's happening around the state. And it's really going to depend upon the outcome of some of these Pinellas and Hillsborough races. There are also some in Broward.
Well, and this is a battle for sort of the soul of the school board here locally and in many places around the state. The idea is to put some ideology in there that will advance and support and expand school choice in these communities. The big challenge that the local school districts have, though, is money and the resources adequate to educate these children in a environment where we've had such rising inflation and the infrastructure that has been built for generations to support these children is now being hollowed out and is no longer has the enrollment necessary to support it. School costs 100% to run, whether there's 70% children in it or it's all full. So the real challenge these school boards are going to have is coming up with the resources to provide a good education for these children as the school choice movement expands.
It's been interesting to watch over the last cycles how important these school board races and how much publicity they're getting as well, especially after, Moms for Liberty got involved. And then there was a candidate over in the Brevard area, I believe, who ousted one of the founders of Moms for Liberty and then started her own organization to go against Moms for Liberty. I talked to her about a month or two ago, so it's been interesting to watch.
Well, and the other thing that's happened too, and Jim has probably watched this from the sidelines happen. I saw it, up close and personal. But so much of education is now being run out of Tallahassee. A lot of the policy decisions that once were a bastion of the local school district are now being managed out of Tallahassee through the Florida statutes.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm a big fan of local control, a big fan of home rule. Same thing has happened with growth management in many cases in Tallahassee, and in the infinite wisdom of the legislature, they decide to step in. They created these counties, they create the cities, and the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, I guess. But I do think the government closer to the people, one size fits all in a state as diverse as Florida really has never made sense to me, and I'm really a big fan of home rule and local control.
The time is now 8 o'clock Eastern. That means, of course, the polls closing statewide in Florida. We're going to be updating folks on several different races occurring tonight. But another race as well. I know that a lot of people are paying close attention to. Matt Gaetz is a race up on the Panhandle. That's one now that the time is 8 o'clock. There's a couple of other races that we're going to be paying close attention to, but with the clock now at 8:01 Eastern, we might actually get some closure on some of these races that look to be, beyond a shred of a doubt that they're actually going to go for the leading candidate on the results page. So
I think what makes Matt Gaetz's race so interesting, not just I'm not even focusing on this current race that he's running. The likelihood of him running for governor, I guess, reportedly, experts believe that McCarthy is trying to not quite hurt his chances here because that's pretty hard to do, but his chance down the road if he wants to run for governor. Is that accurate, Tom and Jim?
I believe it's accurate. I don't know what Jim thinks, but I think that the chance of beating the Gaetz family is extremely popular in Northeast Florida in the Panhandle. His father, Matt, was a president of the Senate. Actually, know Matt's father, Don, and his mother, Vicky, and their children well, and spent some time with Matt when he was in the House of Representatives. He's one of the brightest people I've ever met in politics. One of the most articulate people I've ever met in politics. Absolutely a lightning rod and a firebrand for sure. But he's very popular in the Panhandle.
Let's come back to Gaetz for in just 1 second, because we do have a projected winner now in the U.S. Senate race on the GOP side. Incumbent Senator Rick Scott, very little surprise, of course, winning in a landslide based on the Associated Press projection. He is currently at 84.5% of all votes on the GOP side with 74% precincts reporting. He is the projected winner on the GOP side and will go to November, of course, likely to face Debbie Mooker Powell. Thank you. With 78% of precincts reporting, this could be the next race that is called. We anticipate that happening in the minutes ahead here. But let's just kind of really quickly focus on Senator Scott. Guys, he was going to cruise tonight, and of course he has maybe a little bit more of a test, obviously, come November.
Yeah, and he hasn't spent any ad money, to my knowledge, on talking about Keith or John, his opponents in the Republican primary. Currently, what I've been able to follow is that he's been spending money on attack ads against Mooker Powell. So I don't think he was even concerned about his primary, and experts were not concerned about his primary as well.
Yeah, I think, as I said, no one's going to outwork Rick Scott. He's the most focused and disciplined individual I have ever personally known in politics by a long shot. And no one will outwork him, no one will outspend him. And it's going to take all the king's horses and all the king's men to defeat him in the state of Florida.
So we'll keep a close eye on now the Democratic side with Debbie Mooker Powell. And a commanding lead there. Let's bring it back here if we can and continue to talk about Gaetz. I'm sorry, Tom. I interrupted you there because I needed to get in that breaking news alert. But Gaetz is always going to be a talking point in Florida politics.
Yeah, he actually enjoys being a talking point and works real hard at it. And I do think Ty was right. I think McCarthy's entrance into that race was more about putting some points on the board and kind of tarnishing his image statewide for some ambitions that he likely has going forward. And he's one of the most talented people I have ever met. Just a brilliant young man.
Now, faced controversy, obviously sexual misconduct allegations in years past. That's something that his challenger in the primary, Aaron Dimmick, has campaigned heavily, obviously using that as a tool to try to unseat Gaetz. Gaetz has a long history, obviously his family up on the Panhandle, limitless connections on the Panhandle. Is there his future, though, as a candidate for governor? What do you hear in Republican circles when his name is tossed about, even though he's had obviously such a controversial last several years?
Well, before McCarthy got involved in this primary, there was a poll that came out, and Ron DeSantis' wife was in it, and Matt Gaetz was running second in a Republican primary for governor. So I mean, he is definitely well known and well liked in the most conservative segments of the Republican base. But being from the Panhandle is not a great place to be running for governor statewide. It'd be much better to be from media markets in Central Florida somewhere or South Florida. Only time will tell, but I suspect he would have a difficult time overcoming some of the salaciousness of some of the allegations in Congress. And there's still an ethics report up there. I don't know what they do with it. I don't know, what the facts come out. The Justice Department obviously didn't decide to pursue it. He denies them, and we'll have to see how all that plays out, I guess, before we know for sure.
Jim, we have another projection to get to. Do you have any comments on Gates before we move on from that race?
Yeah, most of what I have to say is not appropriate at this time of the night. It's still the family hour. I think that if he is the Republican nominee for governor, the Democrats can win the governor's race. Otherwise, I think it's going to take a little more time. The state is constantly changing, but I think he could galvanize a majority of Floridians, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, to make sure he's not the next governor.
Well, for what it's worth, the polls have just closed up on the Panhandle, and I do have some of the results that are coming in from his race, and he does have a sizable lead. It's early, but he's up a couple. I would say it looks like about 14,000 votes over Aaron Dimmick. He has about 70% of the vote to Aaron's about 30% of the vote. So that's something that we'll check it. We'll keep tabs on over the course of the live stream. In the meantime, I want to bring everybody out to another projection just coming in to WFLA.com via the Associated Press. Debbie Mooker-Sill-Powell has won on the Democratic side in the race for U.S. Senate. It will be the incumbent Senator Rick Scott against Debbie Mooker-Sill-Powell in November. Ty, you've covered this race extensively on WFLA News Channel 8. Your thoughts? This is what people anticipated.
Yes, this is no surprise from many people. And it's no surprise that Campbell came in second. But Debbie Mooker-Sill-Powell, former congresswoman, one term out of Miami-Dade, she was ousted by the county's former mayor, Carlos Jimenez, who is a close ally of Donald Trump. And Carlos Jimenez is expected to stay in Congress as well. So it's interesting to see a former congresswoman who was ousted trying to now oust Rick Scott. And my question to Jim, what does Mooker-Sill-Powell have to do to try to oust Rick Scott, who, of course, served as governor for 2 terms and then ousted Bill Nelson, longtime Democratic senator? So what does Mooker-Sill-Powell have to do to try to win in November?
She has to convince folks, not just in Florida, that these 2 amendments on the ballot are going to drive turnout in the way that a close presidential race drives turnout in a state, and put her within reach of Rick Scott strictly based on the partisan vote, because he has solidified the Democrat and some of the independent votes against him just because he's a hardline Republican. If she can raise the money based on that to introduce herself, she has a competitive race, but that is a lot of money. And the question is not how much money he raises, it's how much she raises. She doesn't need to raise nearly as much as he does, but if she can raise enough to compete, to introduce herself and distinguish herself, it becomes a competitive race. But that's how she gets there.
Does she have a chance, you think?
Well, I think she has a chance if Vice President Harris continues to run strong, and if those amendments are demonstrating a significant turnout in Florida. I think she has a chance to raise the money, but that's the first step to her being competitive.
Yeah, but if you're the Harris campaign, aren't you looking at Rick Scott's limitless amount of money or seemingly limitless amount of money? And is time
it's not
better
about
spent?
The Harris campaign. It's not about Rick Scott is a national figure. And it's about people all over the country. If you look at the Val Demings race, she got money from all over the country. The Ted Cruz race. These races have become national. Rick Scott has made himself a national figure, and you either love him or you don't. And so this is entirely independent of people helping the president. The because the president Vice President Harris does not need to win Florida to win the election.
Right.
And it is not their top priority. This is about people around the country that are concerned about the future and want to have senators there to either protect their rights or to protect them if Donald Trump's the president.
Yeah, Mukersel Powell, she has been campaigning on reproductive access, abortion access. She has also just been talking about the economy as well. She's been talking about Rick Scott a lot and some of his policies and what he has voted on, for instance, and what he has voted against, like IVF. So she has been hitting Rick Scott on a lot of those key issues. Do you think that that will help her when it comes to attracting the no party, which is a growing population politically in Florida? Do you think that she will attract no party to her side by continuing to talk about abortion and IVF, some of the key issues in this election?
Yes, Ty, but she has to raise the money to be heard. In a state this large and this busy, if you're not on television or vast social media, your message is not heard. But yes, if she has the resources to deliver the message you described, and I would add healthcare as well. I think that is a major distinction between her and Senator Scott. It's an important issue for Floridians of many stripes, but she's got to have the resources to deliver that message, and that's when that race gets competitive.
Again, looking here at some of the results that are coming in at this hour. For those of you perhaps just finding the live stream in District 12, Gus Bilirakis defeating Hank Dunlap. In District 13, Whitney Fox is going to be taking on Anna Paulina Luna in November. Coming out here to District 14, Robert Rochford now has earned the check mark on the GOP side. Will go up against Kathy Castor in Tampa in November. So I'm sure that voters will be learning more about Robert Rochford, even though, of course, it is firmly a Democratic stronghold in District 14. District 15, Laurel Lee cruising to a primary night victory against James Judge and Jennifer Barbosa. In District 16, on the GOP side, Vern Buchanan sleepwalking to a victory here. And then on the Democratic side of that same district, it's kind of interesting between Jan Schneider and Trent Miller. Just a few hundred votes really separating these two. Mm-hmm. And then also as well down in Sarasota in District 17, just a few thousand votes, couple thousand votes between Manny Lopez and Matthew Montavon, 72% of precincts reporting. Things are getting pretty crazy down at the DNC. It's every time I look down at my touchscreen, it's just a light show here. The spectacle with the RNC and the DNC, it just increases. It seems like all the time. It just becomes bigger and brighter. But we were talking a little bit about this earlier. Kamala Harris coming out on night one. There's just a different energy in this room with the Democratic Party. And while Florida is considered to be a more red state than perhaps 10, 15, 20 years ago, Tom, you can't deny, even as a Republican strategist, even as a Republican analyst, you look at this and you say that this is a different energy than had it been Joe Biden running for re-election.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. She has definitely energized the Democratic base. They've been looking for an alternative. They now have one, and so far she's been an effective messenger. There's still a lot of tests that have to be passed by both candidates as they go head-to-head in the general election, and they're certainly having their week here, having come out of this first month of the coming into the nomination. As for Florida, I think it's a long shot. If Florida becomes in the margin of error state, Republicans have a big problem nationally. I think Florida probably stays Republican by a substantial majority, notwithstanding Kamala Harris as the nominee. And I think that as a result of that, they're not going to spend a lot of money here in Florida, in all likelihood, to try to drive turnout, which is not good news for Democrat candidates down ballot. We'll just have to see how this plays out, though.
It's interesting that at least so far, and again, she just became the nominee through the virtual vote. But it's interesting. I was talking to somebody, a DNC delegate, on how, of course, former President Trump has held campaign rallies in Florida. However, we haven't heard from Vice President Harris. Do you think that we will see Vice President Harris hold a campaign rally here in the Sunshine State?
I wouldn't count on that. I think you might see the vice president down here raising money, or you might see her down here raising money in South Florida. But she doesn't need Florida to win. North Carolina is surprisingly competitive.
It's a toss-up now, right?
It's remarkable. The Republican candidate for governor
Mark
is
Robinson.
driving people to the Democrat. And so there are other states, and given the limited resources and the number of days they have, I could see some senior people from that campaign down here for Whitney Fox, potentially. Or if there are any other competitive congressional races in Florida, but that would be about it.
We have another projection to get to here, everybody, and let's see if we can bring it up on screen. Again, JB, Tom Lee, Ty Russell, Jim Davis here with you, everybody, on your local election headquarters, and we have an AP projection. Matt Gaetz up in District 1. Yeah, he's the projected winner over Aaron Dimmick. This is a race that isn't local here to the Tampa Bay area, but because obviously of Gaetz and how much attention he attracts, a lot of questions here asked locally about Matt Gaetz and whether or not there was any doubt that he would actually win tonight on the GOP side of things. It turned out to be relatively quickly, 17 minutes after polls closing, the Associated Press calling it for Matt Gaetz. Tom, any reaction to this?
I'm not the least bit surprised. This effort by McCarthy was personal. I was there for the first 4 votes of the 14 votes it took for Kevin McCarthy to become speaker, and it didn't last long. And Matt led the charge, and so I'm not surprised that Kevin McCarthy came down here to repay the favor, if you will. But I never doubted that Matt Gaetz would have a solid victory in his primary.
What do you think Casey DeSantis is thinking about right now when she's looking at him easily winning this race? Is she worried at all, or?
I don't think Casey DeSantis wants to be governor, but if she does, I don't think there's anybody can beat her. She's that talented. She is a very, very talented woman. She comes from this business. She's extremely telegenic, extremely articulate. She can connect with people, frankly, in a way her husband can't. And I think if she wants to, she's a breast cancer survivor. She's got young children, and that makes some tough sledding for a statewide candidate. But there's no question she's an amazing talent.
Lack of experience, perhaps. I mean, obviously, being the First Lady of Florida comes with a great deal of experience, but at least holding elected office, obviously not something that is, really in her wheelhouse. But yeah, the future of the governor's mansion in Tallahassee is an interesting talking point in Florida politics these days. Jim, any you mentioned earlier it was a little too early in the night to be talking about Gaetz. It's 8:18. I don't know what qualifies as being late enough in the night for you to be talking about Gaetz now, but figured I would check back with you here.
Represents everything wrong with the United States Congress. Everything. But I will agree with Tom. He just got reelected, and there are folks who I know. I have family there. They probably voted for him because they're hardcore Republicans. I love my cousins, and he's a United States representative. But being governor of the state of Florida requires a level of adult supervision over the legislature and a level of maturity that his father had as president of the Senate and Tom Lee had as president of the Senate. And I don't believe he's ever demonstrated that. And I think the Congress, you can do that in Congress. You can be on cable news. You can say outrageous things. You can stake out extreme positions because it is a cauldron of debate and discussion. We thrive on that. But a governor is there to provide stability and unity and get us to work together and get things done. In this state, the governor cannot stand still. There's too much going on.
Do you think that we will see a sort of Andrew Gillum? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves and talking about the governor's race, but because Matt Gaetz is likely to run eventually, and so that's why we're talking about this, but do you think we'll see a sort of Andrew Gillum figure to fire up Democrats in the state of Florida?
Well, the challenge you're going to have on the Democratic side is the money. because again, to be heard statewide, I'm going to guess it's probably $50 million.
That's right.
Probably a lot more just to be heard. And it's going to have to be a self-funder, or it's going to have to be a candidate like Matt Gaetz who makes the race national and generates a lot of interest around the country. And then it's the quality of the candidate. It could be somebody we've never heard of. Nobody knew who Whitney Fox is a year ago, and she may be a United States Congresswoman next year, and she would be terrific. And something Tom said earlier, I think is really important. People think the Republican Party picks their candidates and the Democrats do. It's really self-selection. It's people that decide they feel compelled to serve. That's why people run. They hope they're going to win, but they feel compelled. I think there are people out there in this state that are really horrified at the direction the state's going in, and that the state capital does not reflect our values. And I think it's going to draw somebody out of quality. It could be a retired general, it could be a retired businesswoman.
Let's flip to the other side really quickly. I want to talk about the state of the Republican Party here in Florida. You know, I follow certain pundits on social media that really are hyper focused on Florida politics each and every day. And one race that has percolated to the top, that has captured interest that we haven't talked about so far tonight, is District 7 in the state Senate race. And I'll explain to you why. You have State Senator Tom Leek, who is the incumbent there, against David Shore, who is the former St. Johns County sheriff. And the reason why this particular race in District 7, again, on the state Senate side, we haven't really talked about the state Senate all that much tonight as far as races go. Again, full races and results on WFLA.com. But the reason why District 7 is of particular interest to state analysts is because you had Tom Leek, who had a full ringing endorsement from Governor DeSantis, and you had David Shore receive the endorsement of, I can't believe we haven't mentioned his name an hour and 15 minutes into the live stream, but we haven't talked about Donald Trump that much tonight. But David Shore, the former sheriff there in St. Johns County, receiving the endorsement of Donald Trump. So you have one candidate in that race receiving DeSantis's endorsement. You have another candidate in that race receiving a very loud Trump endorsement on his Truth Social platform, on his social media platform. For what it's worth, nothing's official just yet from what I have seen, but Leek, the incumbent who has received the endorsement from DeSantis, has about a 15,000 vote lead, about 47% to 27%. So that brings up just the interesting dynamics, Tom, right now with Florida Republicans. You have some that receive resounding support from Donald Trump, others that are backed, more on a state level by DeSantis. It's kind of hard to clear through the fog and figure out exactly what the identity is right now, because you have these two massive figures at the top of the party. But how do you see it?
Well, that's a unique race. Tom Leek is a very, very popular member of the House of Representatives. He's the appropriations chair there. He is a very good fundraiser, and he was also opposed by John Morgan, who came out in opposition to him because of his work that he does for insurance companies and the role he played in insurance tort reform in the House of Representatives. But I think this is a sort of a unique race. I do understand the Donald Trump versus Ron DeSantis endorsement battle and popularity battle. I tell all my friends and people who call, who are trying to help people raise money, who are aspiring or fantasizing, as the case may be, about running for governor, to hold off until after the presidential race, because if Donald Trump wins the White House, he's going to decide who the Republican nominee is in Florida for governor. And you can put anybody up you want, but he's going to put his finger on the scales. And I think that will matter a great deal if he's president of the United States. Right now, I'm not surprised Tom Leek is winning this race. He's very popular and very popular in district. He's been an incumbent. So I'm not all that surprised, although that is a pretty substantial lead.
Yeah, he over again, former St. Johns County Sheriff David Shore. Ty, it's interesting to cover, right? I mean, some candidates receiving a DeSantis endorsement, others receiving a Trump endorsement. Which actually matters more? Does it matter at like what the race actually looks like? It's a conundrum right now that's kind of almost uncharted territory for the state.
Yeah, this infighting really in the for these two leaders, both who live in Florida, because you have the former president who resides in Mar-a-Lago, and then of course DeSantis, Florida boy, native here, and so it's very interesting to watch this sort of infighting in the Republican Party, and I wonder if that will continue even after November, because I'm pretty sure DeSantis is going to try to go again when it comes to running for president down the road again. And I wonder if Trump loses or whether he wins, if he will still try to harm DeSantis's chances after this sort of infighting between the two.
There's so many things that can happen out there that are all really credible. I mean, there's a decent chance that Marco Rubio, if Donald Trump wins, becomes a part of the president's cabinet in some form or fashion, and that DeSantis has to appoint somebody to serve in the United States Senate, and he may decide to do what Charlie Crist did and appoint somebody who's just a caretaker so that he could run in the next election for the United States Senate. It's really hard to say what's going to happen, but I think until after November, it's going to be hard to tell who, if Trump were to win the White House, J.D. Vance is in the catbird seat to be the presidential nominee for Republicans in 2028. So we're just going to have to wait and see. But these two guys are very, very popular in Republican primaries, no question about it.
Looking at some of the results from tonight, we talked about the Senate and congressional races. What does this mean moving forward, do you think? And I want an answer from both of you, just so I can also use it for tonight. But what does this mean moving forward into November, some of the results from tonight? Anybody can go first.
You mean the Florida results?
Yes, the Florida results.
Well, I don't think there are any surprises with what's happened tonight in Florida, but in the Senate, I don't think the Democrats are counting on winning Florida to keep the Senate, but they could, based on what we discussed earlier. Keeping the Senate Democratic is going to be tough. They're going to have to win a seat that nobody thinks they can win right now, and they're also going to have to hold the John Tester seat, the incumbent in Montana. So the advantage is with the Republicans to have a narrow margin in the Senate right now. Now, if Vice President Harris runs strong, that will change, including winning. The House is a different story. I think the House is more likely than not to go Democratic, but that's not clear either. It also depends on the presidential, and the margin is likely to be modest. So I think you're probably going to end up with divided government, and I think we could spend all night talking about the presidential election. I think it's too soon to predict that outcome.
And then what do you think?
I think all the stars are going to have to line up for Rick Scott not to win re-election to the United States Senate. I don't think that in all likelihood Florida gets close enough for the presidential candidates to spend much money here. It's going to be a 5 or 7 state race through Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and out into Nevada and Arizona potentially, and maybe Georgia. But I don't see a lot of effort being spent here in Florida to turn out votes for the reason that Jim mentioned. They don't really need the pathway to controlling the Congress or controlling the United States Senate or the White House does not run through Florida in this election cycle, which is somewhat unusual given the evolution in the state. That it's always been, the I-4 corridor was the heartbeat of America in terms of determining what was going to happen presidentially.
It's a little strange to be here on primary night in Florida. I've covered several primaries now in Florida. I've been to different states and different areas, but Florida primary night, usually there's tremendous consequence and certain outcomes that are going to shape Florida's political future. This is the one that carried the least dramatic flair of any that I have been part of, just because so much of it was kind of, written on the wall, so to speak, already. The one race that I think is, again, worth bringing up that is going to have a big spotlight on it locally is, one more time, Anna Paulina Luna versus Whitney Fox in District 13, Pinellas County in November. There's going to be a lot of money brought into this race. Anna Paulina Luna has done well to become a name in Washington. Whitney Fox is looking to do the same and rally a lot of Democratic support here in our area. Okay. And District 16, we're just being told here, let's go to District 16 on the Democratic side really quickly and just get in this projection. Jan Schneider, these results have not yet updated, but the Associated Press saying is the projected winner in District 16 on the Democratic side. Again, this is Vern Buchanan's seat. And Vern Buchanan is a David versus a Jan Snyder's Goliath, if you will. Or no, strike that, reverse it. Vern Buchanan is Goliath. Jan Schneider is David as far as District 16 in November. But coming back out here to District 13, Whitney Fox, Anna Paulina Luna. I can already just imagine turning on my TV at home, and every time there's a commercial break, I'm going to see an ad for one of these two ladies. What is it going to take? What is going to put a candidate over the top in this race? I'd like to bring this up here for both of you, Jim and Tom. You guys know what a dogfight looks like in Florida politics. These two are going to be going at it relentlessly in the coming months. How do you see it shaking out, and what do you think is going to be a key differentiator between the two?
One advantage I see the Democrat having in this race is the lack of a voting record in Congress. And a voting record can be a real liability. As Jim knows, there's no germanity and single subject rules in Congress, so it's the kitchen sink, that goes into these bills, and you can find something just about any piece of legislation up there you can criticize someone over. So I think there's some vulnerability probably there. Anna Paulina Luna's constituents love her, though, and I think both candidates are going to work really hard starting tomorrow to begin to define one another. And I know they've had reams of opposition research that they've done on one another, and I think you're absolutely correct. The money is going to pour into this race is going to be substantial, and they're going to be running a lot of ads on WFLE.
and that means I'm going to be out in Pinellas County, very far away from Tampa, which means I get to
Some
work.
good beaches over there.
Yeah.
You're going to be talking to Anna and Whitney quite a bit. Jim, what do you think?
One of the questions is going to be how well Representative Luna's attended to the district. I have no idea. I know she's been very immersed in the national politics, which really don't matter to voters that vote in presidential elections. It matters to the base. I saw she championed some issues about beach renourishment. I haven't really seen anything else she's done. Bill Young serviced that district. If you had an issue, he took care of it. He didn't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. I don't know if she's done that or not. It's been real tempting for all these members to have stars in their eyes in Washington. As far as what it takes to win, I always remember what David Jolly said when he was running against Alex Sink in that race. He said he was going out of town for the weekend in the middle of the race. And I said, why are you going out of town? He said, because I'm not in control of this race. It's been taken over by outsiders. There's a lot of third-party money that goes into these races when they're competitive, and the campaigns have little control over them. At least that's what the law is supposed to allow. And so this race could become a proxy against the Trump agenda, because she, again, embraces the Trump agenda unabashedly, and you love her or you hate her for that. And I think that it will become a national race if it becomes competitive. And I think she'll have all the resources she needs, because we are one of the most expensive media markets in the country. We're the second most expensive out of Miami. And so Tom's right. There will be ads up and down. And at the end of the day, the quality of the candidates matter. And Whitney Fox is a very good candidate. And she is new. And that does have some value.
I believe we're working on a story for our website right now. Who is Whitney Fox? Just because there are so many mainstream, non-politically minded, Florida voters that are still unfamiliar with who Whitney Fox is, even though, of course, we have covered Whitney on WFLA News Channel 8. This is really now the coming out party for her as a potential challenger to Anna Paulina Luna. That article, by the way, is going to be coming to WFLA.com. We're getting close to wrapping up the live stream here with Jim Davis, Tom Lee, again, a la 2022, bringing it back here with two of our favorite political analysts.
And I just want to interrupt really quickly
Yeah.
because now I have to go start working for our 10 and 11 o'clock and working with our editor and photographer. So I'm going to disappear if that's okay.
Well,
I
I'm basically calling for final thoughts here.
Perfect.
I mean, Tom, Jim, biggest takeaways from tonight, even though, I mean, you probably, if you had your bingo card, everything pretty much went according to plan, right? I mean, as far as how this night was really stacking up, but is there any political takeaways, plot lines you're following?
Well, I want to go off script because I keep bringing up the school board races, but we're not going to talk about them. But I've been watching the results, and it looks like that the mainstream Democrats and Republicans are winning their races. As Tom had mentioned earlier, some of them are going to be decided tonight. Laura Hines, who's a terrific school board member in Pinellas County, Naval Academy grad, very active in the faith community over there, chair of the school board. Looks like she's going to win. Some very good members of the Hillsborough County School Board. Those decisions are going to have more impact on the voters here than a lot of these Senate and congressional races in terms of the quality of the schools their kids are entering into this fall. So I'm very pleased with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'm just reading here. Pinellas School Board District 1 on WFLA.com. Laura Hine is in the lead. District 4, Eileen Long is in the lead over Erica Pritchard. District 5 is very close between Stacy Geller and Katie Blacksburg. Over in Hillsborough County, some of the school races there that we can quickly shout out. District 1, Nadia Combs with a comfortable lead. Jessica Vaughn and Moshe Powell in a bit of a dogfight there. In District 5, Henry Washington, Lynn Gray in the lead in their respective districts, District 5 and District 7. All the results on WFLA.com. Tom, before we let you go, any final thoughts, any key storylines you're going to be paying close attention to?
Actually, was going to bring up the same thing Jim did. I don't have access to those numbers on the school board races, but those are some pretty critical races. And whether or not anybody gets above 50% and can avoid a runoff, which in these nonpartisan races is a real threshold you'd like to get over and not have to do this again.
Ty, any final thoughts from you?
Everything was expected. Everything, what we predicted just by talking to voters and hearing from experts. It seems like everybody was right, and we're going to see this interesting Pinellas County congressional race. I have to go out there and cover that. So that means for me personally, I'm just thinking about my trip from Tampa to, St. Pete a lot. That's tough on me when I have to get home at like 8 o'clock at night. But yes,
this is all a big dry run for November. Jim, Tom, you're both invited. Jim, we would love to have you back in the Stream Center to do this in person on election night in November. Tom, of course, absolutely welcome back in November for the big night. And folks, we really appreciate your time here on your local election headquarters. All of your local election results are on WFLA.com. One more time, a huge thank you to Jim Davis, Tom Lee, Ty Russell. I'm JB Buno. We'll see you next time here on WFLA.
Thanks, JB.
Peace out.